Greetings to all my dearest fellows, and welcome to this exquisite new Doctor Who video today. We are ranking all of the third Doctor TV adventures in this tier list that you're looking at right now. Why am I doing this, you ask? Well, I am currently in the rows of doing a Doctor Who marathon where I watch the entirety of the Doctor Who canonical show. Right now, I am binging through Ark in Space at the moment, which is an absolute treat, but what that means is that we are done binging all of the third Doctor's era. And might I just quickly interject and say how grossly consistent the Pertwee era is. I don't think there's a single story on this entire tier list that I didn't have at least a base enjoyment of. But with all that dilly-dallying out of the way, let's rank all the stories, shall we? Starting with the Spearhead from Space, the debut Pertwee story, the beginning of the glorious Robert Holmes perfect streak. I'm gonna put it in S. I think it's a very strong start, you know. I think that Pertwee first and foremost slips into the role perfectly as the Doctor. I think for a first story with the Nestine consciousness and the Autons, I think it does brilliantly at setting up those monsters. Love a good alien invasion story. I think this episode does that angle perfectly. It's a fresh start for the show as well. It does begin the Earthbound era of Doctor Who, which is one that I am very, very fond of, especially after this most recent binge that I've done. I love the plot point where the Doctor has to essentially convince the Brig that it's still him, because obviously this is a fresh face that the Brigadier hasn't met before, right? So that's a fun little part of the story. This is also just a really good jumping on point, so I feel pretty confident that Spearhead deserves S-tier status. I think it is a brilliant story through and through. Right, now that Spearhead is indeed out of the way, it's time to move on to Doctor Who and the Silurians. I'm just going to get this out of the way real quick. I'm a bit of a Season 7 fanboy, so I think I'm going to be quite biased towards all of these stories. But I do think it deserves at least an A tier. I'm going to plop it in A. It's not perfect. Maybe it could have been trimmed to a 6-parter. It feels a little bit elongated, but there's no denying how quintessential it is. There is a reason why nearly every Silurian-centric story to appear after this basically almost rips off the premise of this one verbatim. So it shows this story's staying power and how genius it is. The development of the Silurian virus was also fun. It was just good overall, really. It was a very, very solid one. But yeah, moving on to the Ambassadors of Death. This one is often overlooked in Season 7, but I feel like out of most of Season 7, this has got the best pacing. But I don't just want to put every single Pertwee story in A and S, because then that's just not fair. I mean, I could, couldn't I? I could do that, but I'm not going to. I do think this one is brilliant, though. I think maybe B or A. I think I'll leave it in A for now, and then, like I say, I can shift it around if we run out of room on one of the tiers. But this story takes the alien invasion plot, but twists it into a political drama. And I really enjoy the unique spin this has. The mystery of what happens to the astronauts was a fun hook. You get some amazing unit action in this story as well, actually. My only real gripe is the ending feels a tiny bit rushed. Besides that, it's another absolute corker of a story. So, you know what? Yeah, that's gonna stay in A, I reckon. But a story that is certainly not going to land in A, but instead in S, is Inferno. This one is just one of my favourite Doctor Who stories of all time, straight up, and it is going above Spearhead from Space, no question. This was the first Pertwee story that I ever watched when I got the VHS when I was a wee lad. This is the first Doctor Who episode featuring a parallel universe take. This is where we see the Doctor get thrown into a fish out of water story, sent into a fascist parallel Earth, where we see an evil Brigadier, an evil Liz Shaw. Some very, very strong cliffhangers in this story as well. The Primords are a serviceable monster for the story as well. Not the perfect monster, but they're pretty good. They're pretty menacing, so that's all you can really ask for. Plot is overall captivating, and the Doctor essentially trying to stop the drill before the end of the world is a fun premise to see play out in its glorious 7 parts. Not once do I really feel the length of this story, considering it's reaching 3 hours. in runtime. I think this thing just still flies by. I think it's one of the quintessential Doctor Who stories of all time, and I think it is one of the stories that is popular for a reason. I think it's earned its status, and yeah, it deserves every lick of praise it gets, I think. But yeah, we're moving out of season 7. What a shame. A short but sweet season. Well, the stories aren't short, 3 out of 4 of them are 7 parts. But anyway, I digress. Now we move on to season 8. Another pretty good season. This is kind of known as the Unit Family season. We start out with Terror of the Autons, a landmark story once again. Doesn't have the same staying power as Spearhead from Space, I feel. I feel like often this one gets compared to it, which is unfair, because Terror of the Autons doesn't really stack up to Spearhead from Space in the same way. I will put it in B though, because it does have a lot of... Oh, actually, does it deserve A? First Master story. Autons are back. Pretty menacing once again. I feel like the new design of them in this story was pretty creepy, I will admit, so that does earn it some points. I do enjoy the murder mystery surrounding those plastic flowers, daffodils. The missing scientists was cool. Like I say, seeing Roger Delgado is always a win, personally. But for being at 4-parter, I feel like it does suffer a wee bit from padding. But, it is pretty good. I do love the Autons and Roger Delgado. And it's the first Joe Grant story as well, huh? Fuck it. You know what? I'm feeling generous. We're sticking it in A. It might go down to B later, but I'll give it its time in the sun. Pretty fun one. Also, bonus points for a plastic sofa literally eating a dude alive. Fun stuff. Anyway, right, now we move on to The Mind of Evil. At one point, it was my favourite Pertwee story. I still really love it. It's not my number one anymore. But it is a damn good story all the same. The plot point of rehabilitating criminals was a interesting origin story for the machine in question, and the mystery deaths surrounding the machine creates an inciting incident as well. I think the strongest point of this story is the concept of weaponizing people's fears against them, if that makes sense. And the Master's hidden plan is fun as well. It's a lot of fun to see Roger Delgado in so many of these stories coming up, I won't lie. This is also one of my favourite Unit stories. I feel like most of the Unit family is utilised really well here. And I've just, a side note actually, I've got to say I absolutely chuckle every single time we realise that the Master's worst fear is the Doctor laughing at him. Where is this going then? I think I have to put it in A after all that praise. I do think it's better than all the other stuff in A. I don't know if I want to squeak it up to S tier yet though. I might give it a bit before it graduates. Or it might stay down there, that's fine too. But yeah, no, Mind of Evil is another excellent one, to be honest. I really had a good time with it. But yeah, now we move on to the Claws of Axos. Now, I'm going to say sorry in advance. I'm not the biggest fan of this one. There is a loyal fan base of Pertwee apologists and enthusiasts that will defend this story and will say it's one of the best Pertwee ones. For me, it's kind of always passed me by. I don't think it's dreadful by any means. I think it just doesn't grip me in the same way some of the other Pertwee's ones do. Plot-wise, I enjoy the plot device of the Axonite and the potential miracles that the Axons present. When the real intentions of the Axons come out, it's exciting, admittedly. The spaceship scenes were really cool in this, I will say that. I did enjoy all of those, and I did enjoy the Roger Delgado Pertwee team up in this story. But it does feel a bit slow going, which is why, now put away your pitchforks, please. But I'm sorry to have to put it there. I don't think it's the best one in the world. I don't hate it. It wasn't a painful watch or anything. I don't think it stacks up to the ones I've seen earlier in the Pertwee era that we've just ranked, unfortunately. It's fine. It does the job, in my opinion. It's nothing to write home about. Right, Colony in Space. The next one I'll be talking about. The Doctor goes on a mission from the Time Lords to stop the Master. The conflicts between the miners and the colonists was cool, and the scenes between Pertwee and Delgado are great. This is where you're going to be grabbing your pitchforks and torches, because I'm putting Colony in Space above Claws of Axos. I'm sorry. My hot takes on Pertwee might be a bit too spicy for some, but I think I really, from the bottom of my heart, enjoyed Colony more than Claws. I really, really did, and I'm really, really sorry, but It's just the way the cookie crumbles, I'm afraid. Right, now we move on to the Demons. Another excellent one. Devil's End makes for an amazing location, first of all. I love the gothic feel. This is the first Doctor Who story that I've watched in my marathon from the first Doctor onwards where I truly get the feel of gothic horror in Doctor Who, which is why I just enjoyed the shit out of this one on this marathon, man. The gothic feel is so welcomed, and the witch hunt stuff, and seeing the Master once again, such a treat. I love Roger Delgado. Azal is also menacing and intimidating. I really don't have anything bad to say about it, to be honest. Unit are on top form. Joe does a brilliant job. Katie Manning, I should say. Obviously Pertwee, obviously Delgado. I don't think there's a weak link in this thing. I think much like Inferno, this deserves the praise that it gets. I think it deserves a low S tier. I think it does earn it. I really do think so. I think it is that good. But that might just be me being biased towards gothic horror Doctor Who. But what can you do? Shoot me. Please. Do. Anyway, now we move on to the next season. We start with Day of the Daleks. This is a interesting phenomenon of a story. Had a very wanky sort of Dalek voice in its original release and broadcast, but then Nick Briggs came in to save the day with a remaster. Also, this was the first Dalek story since Evil of the Daleks, which was a ton of years ago between that and this. So this was the Daleks' grand return. I think it actually does quite well. In previous years, I was quite harsh on this story, but on this marathon, I rather enjoyed it. I feel like what made me enjoy this story on this marathon was the long gap between the last Dalek appearance and this one. It gave me a lot of time to get over the Dalek fatigue of the 60s. So when then they came back here, I'm like, oh, here they are. Lovely, lovely stuff. Good old Dalek action. Right, the story itself. The desperate attempts to prevent World War III, good stuff. Obviously the Daleks would be behind that. The Daleks attempting to change the future. This story is essentially doing Terminator before Terminator, essentially. And also we get the Ogrons as well. Yeah. This is a pretty solid story. You know what? I did not think I'd be doing this, but I think Day of the Daleks does earn itself A tier. I think it is great. I think it's better than Terror of the Autons. I think it's better than Ambassadors of Death. But if we're taking into account everything, the original Dalek voices are a bit poo. So we're leaving it here behind the Silurians, because I think the Silurians are it's a stronger story overall, and there aren't really any weak links that are egregious like the Dalek voices in Day of the Daleks. Overall, top marks. I thoroughly enjoyed this one on this rewatch, and I did not expect it. I was expecting mid-tier material, but I came out thoroughly having fun with Day of the Daleks. Very good stuff. Right, now we move on to Curse of Peladon. I've had an interesting track record when it comes to the Peladon stories. I won't reveal which one I prefer, because the opinion of that regard has changed with this marathon. But what I will say is I did very much enjoy Curse of Peladon. Previously, I've been a bit harsh on it, but on this rewatch, I did have a good time. I think having this after a streak of invasion stories from the Pertwee era does serve as a change of pace. It's a fun political drama in space. The cool angle of having the Ice Warriors being the prime suspect of the crimes is really, really good stuff, and it's really, really fun to subvert that expectation. And overall, just, I love how well realised Peladon is as a whole with everything going on in it. And also, Alpha Centauri. Come on. You can't not love Alpha Centauri. And for all those reasons, fuck, am I going to have to put Curse of Peladon in A tier too? No, I'm going to be strong. I'm going to put it top of B for now. It could move up, and A tier could move down. Probably not, but who knows. Now we move on to the Sea Devils. Oh boy. Okay, this one is another interesting one. I used to adore this story growing up. I still like it. Put those pitchforks away. Not needed. I will admit the plot does feel quite, we'll say the word borrowed from the Silurians, with the only major difference to it being window dressing. Like they've swapped Unit for the Royal Navy and obviously swapped the Silurians for the Sea Devils. What I will say, the action in this is superior to everything in the Silurians. The Silurians was lacking in a bit of action and high octane like dopamine stuff. And of course, with the inclusion of Roger Delgado's Master, does give this story big points, especially for the sword fight that Pertwee and Delgado share. But I do think with the lack of unit, and with the synopsis being a little bit borrowed from the Silurians, unfortunately, it does hurt me, but the Sea Devils does have to be demoted to B tier. I will put it at the top of B, though. If it weren't for those reasons, it would have been an easy A tier, or maybe even an S tier. A younger me might have put it in S tier. But with all those cards on the table, I can't confidently say that it gets really higher than a B these days, at least for me. You're allowed your own opinion, though, and I'm sure you will voice it very, very pleasantly in the comments. Right, the Mutants is next. I have some very interesting takes when it comes to the Pertwee era, and this will become apparent in a minute. I have never understood the hate that this story gets. It's not an A tier. Actually, maybe it is. The story itself has a lot going for it. Skybase 1 is on the cusp of freedom from the Empire, and they're dealing with like a disease or a mutation, if you will. Speaking of, the Mutants are really cool and creepy, a really good monster design, I think. It's a sort of secret political drama with a class system with the overlords on top. And I do really enjoy the twist of the humans being the invaders after all that, you know? And also the Marshal, I think, is a pretty captivating villain, personally. For all those reasons I've just stated, I'm going to put it in A tier, and I'm going to say it with chest. I think it deserves A tier. The Mutants deserves A tier, goddammit. And I think it's fine at the bottom of A tier, because I've already painted a big enough target on my back because of that fucking story. But now we move on to the Time Monster. So, what's going on in this weird little story? This feels almost like a Pertwee Who parody in some ways, like a satirical adventure. This one feels a bit more slapstick compared to the subtlety of previous Pertwee stories, which might be why this one is less popular. But let's get into the meat and potatoes. So the Doctor is attempting to stop the Master's plot to use the Chronos to rule the world. Cool stuff so far. The warping of time is interesting stuff as well. I love the stuff with the Unit family in the story as well. The visit to Atlantis was a bit strange, but fun. Baby Benton as well, and Tom Tit as well. It's fun all around. I think the best way to watch this is to try not to take it too seriously, because when you do, you will start to, well, maybe not get irritated, it might get a little bit on your nerves with how much is going on and how much this story gets away with. Essentially what I'm saying is lighten up. It's just a show. Obviously I say that with jest. You can watch Doctor however you like. I went into this one looking for just a bit of light-hearted fun, and I came out getting exactly what I bargained for, which is why I'm not dreadfully insulted by anything in this story. I think it was fun for the most part, is what I'll say. So for those reasons, the Time Monster is going to go not in D tier, in C tier. And for the sake of my own head not being on the chopping block, it will go behind the claws of Axos. Now, we move on to the Three Doctors. This one is an iconic one, a favourite as well. This sets the standard of what future multi-Doctor stories should strive to be. This might be one of my favourite multi-Doctor stories, actually, though I'm usually very hit and miss on the whole subject, to be honest. Let's go through it. So the Time Lords are recruiting the Doctors, plural, to sort out strange happenings, which eventually leads them down the road to Omega, who I think is a brilliant villain. Seeing 2 and 3 bicker in the TARDIS is glorious. Seeing Brigadier's reaction to the inside of the TARDIS was also glorious. Also, you get Unit in a quarry, I mean a black hole, what more can you fucking want, you know? It's, I think, a perfect send-off for the Earthbound era of Doctor Who, because this will mark the turning point to the more free-spirited Doctor Who, where you can literally write anything for the show again, which previously the show was a bit nailed down to a specific formula, but this kind of does away with that. It's a shame we didn't get more Hartnell moments in this one, but I'm glad that we got anything, considering his health was deteriorating quite fast at the time of filming. So like I say, I'm grateful for whatever we got. So, where am I putting this one? I'm gonna go, oh god, I don't know. I think having the Mutants in A tier is kind of throwing me off a bit. I might have to put the Mutants at the top of B, because I feel like I'm gonna piss too many people off with having that in A. I will put this in A though. I think Three Doctors does deserve A tier. I think it does. But yeah, now we move on to the Carnival of Monsters. I personally, loses me a bit in parts. I think there might be too many moving parts in this story. From a ship to dinosaurs to then like a time loop mystery. Part 1 is intriguing, and the explanation as to how all those things are happening is suitable and is satisfying. I think the rest of the story just kind of stumbles over its own feet a little bit after that. Like it has too many like spinning plates at once, maybe. I do enjoy the B plot being like set on like a planet where like fun is forbidden, and I loved seeing plot B and plot A with the Doctor and Joe kind of like interact with each other accidentally or on purpose. That stuff was all fun. The theme of the story being entertainment as a whole was clever and interesting. I did appreciate they tried to do something clever there. Overall though, like I say, I think this story just bit off a bit more than it could chew. It should have picked like a couple elements and stuck with them, but I think an easy fix for this was to, instead of sacrificing any plot elements, instead just add like a 5th part or even a 6th part. The fact this is a 4-parter does make it feel a bit rushed and scattershot in parts, but I still did enjoy a lot of stuff on here, but overall it was a bit more of an uneven watch compared to previous Pertwee stories. For that reason, oh god, something's got to go in D. God, the fact that I put that above the Time Monster is going to piss off so many people. But I've put Carnival of Monsters in D tier. Maybe something will join it. Who knows? But you'll be pleased to hear the Frontier in Space is certainly not joining Carnival of Monsters in D tier. Frontier in Space, in fact, at one point was one of my favourite Pertwee stories. It's gone down a bit in the estimations for me, but holy shit, is it a corker. I think a bit repetitive in parts. Where I felt that Carnival of Monsters was a bit too short, I feel this one maybe could have been trimmed a bit. There's a bit too much of back and forth of the Doctor getting captured for my taste on this story. Overall though, it's good stuff. Ogron's return was really strong threat, and having the Master in the mix there was also excellent. Speaking of though, the fact this is the last Roger Delgado story just sucks, especially considering they were hoping to do like a finale between him and the Doctor, like a final showdown. It sucks we never got to see that, but if there was a final send-off for Delgado, this is a fitting one as any, I think. I think he does a brilliant job of what he's given in this story. The Draconians are a really, really cool alien to see in this story. The Daleks showing up at the end was just fucking brilliant. It's a shame that it's kind of, you know, spoiled on like the cover, but they're a fun addition to cap off the story, but they were a bit unnecessary for this one. They should have just saved all the Dalek stuff for the next one, which we'll get to. I think overall, I did have a lot of fun on this one. But I'm going to be surprising myself here because I enjoyed it a hell of a lot less than I originally did. And so I'm about to piss a lot more people off because I know there's a cult following behind this one, but I'm going to put it in C. Actually, that doesn't feel right. I'm going to put it at the bottom of B. I caved. I'm too afraid of the Pertwee loyalists that are just gonna mob me for this fucking tier list. But now we move on to Planet of the Daleks. Okay, so originally this was meant to be like the second 6 parts of a 12-part epic that included Frontier in Space as the front 6 parts, as a sort of Daleks Master Plan 2.0, if you will. I think it's good that they separated them. I'll say that. Frontier and Planet have precious little connecting the two besides the inclusion of the Daleks. Not even the Ogron's return for Planet of the Daleks. It's strange choice originally. I can see why they chose to separate this and Frontier. I absolutely love the design of the Emperor Dalek in this one. You won't find many people that don't like it. The Invisible Daleks was an interesting choice. The inclusion of the Thals was nice to see. I think my main issue with Planet of the Daleks is feels a bit too close to the original Dalek story, that being Doctor Who and the Daleks from the 60s. Just feels a bit too close in narrative to that. I feel like I've already seen parts of this story before. Doesn't mean I didn't enjoy it, I just think it's not as original a Dalek story as some of the better Dalek stories that we've seen so far, like Day of the Daleks or Power of the Daleks, for example. And that is a shame, because it was written by Terry Nation. But anyway, yeah, where is this going? I think I'm gonna have to put it in C tier. I might have to. I think I genuinely would sooner watch the Time Monster than Planet of the Daleks. Actually, no, that's a bit harsh. I think I will put it above Time Monster. I think that's better. Yeah, I'll leave it there. That's fine by me. Anyway, right, now we move on to the Green Death. First of all, I'll say this. A fucking beautiful swan song. of a certain era of the show. I know that Pertwee's era does continue beyond this point, but this truly does feel like the end of an era. This feels like the beginning of the end for the Unit family stuff, obviously the end for Joe Grant, and a beautiful end at that. The giant maggots are such an iconic monster and are one of the only classic monsters that my parents actually remember watching as kids. So that's gotta say something, the fact that my parents remember them. Boss was an absolutely brilliant villain, I'll say that as well. I loved the costume changes that the Doctor underwent in this story as well. Loved the stuff of Sergeant Yates. But my absolute favourite scene in this story, and one of my favourite scenes of the entire 60 plus years of Doctor Who, is the final scene of the Doctor and Joe saying goodbye. I really think it's a very beautiful, bittersweet moment of two very old friends parting ways for what they would have assumed would be the last time. It's beautiful. It really is. And also, the story's set in Wales, which is another point in its favour in my book. So, where is the Green Death going after all that? I am going to put it at a very strong A tier at the very top. I might even stick it in S. I'm going to stick it in S. You know what, sag it. It's going S. There you go. Enjoy. But anyway, now we move on to season 11. We start off with one of my favourite Doctor Who stories of all time, The Time Warrior. I'm just going to say this right away. This is tied for being one of my favourite Pertwee stories of ever. It's tied with Inferno for being... It is just that fucking good. It is a absolutely great introduction for Sarah Jane. Great first Sontaran story. In fact, still, to this day, is my favourite Sontaran story. Maybe. Maybe. Who knows? We'll see whether that statement ages well or not when we get to the next Doctor Who tier list. But it's up there. It's definitely one of, if not the best, Sontaran stories, objectively. The medieval setting works so well. Lots of moving parts with the kidnapped scientists, and Irongron and Lynx being at odds all the time. This story does all of that, juggling all of that with also introducing one of the show's most iconic, beloved companions. I don't know what to tell you. And I think also having Liz Sladen's Sarah Jane not trust the Doctor at first gives her so much more agency as a character in the long run. And there's just some great action throughout. There's nothing not to like in here. It's thoroughly excellent. I had so much fun watching it. But now we move on from The Time Warrior to Invasion of the Dinosaurs. Okay, this is going to be an interesting one to talk about. The script is good. There's something here with the story that is working. But you know what isn't working? Those dinosaurs. Those models are ropey at best, laughable at worst. But let's talk about the positives while we can. Seeing London barren and empty, with Unit on high alert from dinosaurs, is a fun hook. It really is. The portrayal of Yates is a really, really good twist in this story. My only note on that particular story note is I wish the portrayal of Yates was revealed to us at the same time as the Doctor. The dinos look crap, like I say. The fact that Unit isn't very trustworthy in this story adds an extra fun little element in there that's unique from most other Pertwee stories, I think. The stuff with Sarah in the spaceship is interesting, if a bit out of nowhere, maybe a bit disjointed from the rest of the story. Best advice I could give you for this one is I recommend tackling the Target novelization first and see how you feel before embarking on the TV story. But yeah, Invasion of the Dinosaurs is going to end up landing in D tier. Unfortunately, it's just going to have to be in D tier, I'm afraid, after all that. But like I say, there's something there. Like, it is a very strong story. I think the production does just let it down, unfortunately. But now, we move on to Death to the Daleks. I personally really love this one. The Daleks having a defect with their weapons is such a cool angle. I wish that it stuck for the whole story. That might be my main criticism with this whole serial, to be honest with you. Exelon is a great setting that sees the crew and the Daleks marooned there, both looking for the cure to the space plague, or whatever they called it, right? Did they just call it the space plague, I think? The Exelons were fun to see on screen as well. The mystery of the city, of course, is also really fun and keeps you hooked. For me, at least, I think the best way to tackle this story is the same way I tackled the Time Monster, is you need to not take it too seriously to enjoy it. And when you do that, You enjoy the little things like patterned floor cliffhanger and the bit where the Daleks use tiny TARDISes for target practice. It's got a lot of charm to it, I think. It makes the Daleks look a bit ridiculous when they get killed in ridiculous ways. But on a whole, the story does a lot right. And I think it's very entertaining if nothing else. So I think that does earn Death to the Daleks at least a B tier. Maybe an A tier. It could be. It could be an A tier. I don't think I enjoyed it more than the Three Doctors though. Let's stick it above the Mutants in B tier for now. I think that's fine. Actually, you know what? No. Bottom of A. It's going bottom of A. I think it's fine there. Okie doke. Right, now we move on to the Monster of Peladon. Returning to Peladon was a great treat. I'll say that first. It was fun seeing all the politics behind the war that went on after they left in Curse of Peladon. Obviously the politics being about like the resources. The supposed supernatural events are interesting. I feel like my main thing with this one, I'll say this real quick, originally, this was my favourite of the Peladon stories, but with this most recent marathon, I've completely flipped. I now prefer Curse of Peladon in droves more than this one. That's not to say this one's bad, but I feel like a lot of the same notes that are accomplished in Curse of Peladon are just kind of used again here. But on the plus side, we got a lot of really good Ice Warrior action in this one, which is what was missing in Curse of Peladon, which might have been why I originally preferred this to Curse of Peladon, because I'm a big Ice Warrior fan. But nonetheless, it's still a very enjoyable watch, but unfortunately not as fun as I remember it being when I watched it as a little kid, which was quite sad to watch it this time around. But with my critical film mind, that's what happens. I get more critical with it. So this is going to go above Planet of the Daleks in C tier, and that is where it shall stay. Now we move on to the final story, the finale of Pertwee's era with Planet of the Daleks. An iconic one for sure. One of my first Pertwee stories, one of my first classic stories, one of my first Doctor Who stories. This feels like a Jon Pertwee greatest hits in the best way. It's got its own story to stand on, but it has a lot of reoccurring elements in its final hour. Obviously, the unit family is back in as full force as it can be without Joe, and obviously Roger Delgado. But what it does make up for with that is the return of like the Doctor's Metabelius crystal coming back into play in a really clever way in this story. The redemption of Mike Yates was well done here. The big fuck off chase scene with all those vehicles that Pertwee got to drive was just such an epic scene and was a perfect thing to feature in the final story of the most James Bond-esque Doctor that's ever braced the show. Obviously the giant spiders are creepy and iconic, and the images of Liz Sladen with one of those fuckers on her back is iconic for a reason. This is a perfect farewell and swan song for Jon Pertwee. It's a self-indulgent action fest of glory and excitement, and I think it's deserved of all the praise that it gets. I think that it isn't necessarily an S tier or an A tier, but there's no way that I'd be able to sleep at night if I didn't at least give it the top of B. I think it does deserve the status of being an excellent send-off for the Third Doctor. It just isn't one that I visit as much nowadays, maybe because I watched it so much from a young age, but that doesn't mean that it isn't an absolute cracking story. But yeah, with all that rambling out of the way, we're done. We've ranked Jon Pertwee's Doctor Who stories. Is there any micromanaging we do? I mean, we could put Time Warrior above Inferno or Inferno above Time Warrior, but that's an asinine thing to do because we'd be here all day. But I'm happy with Spearhead being third. Daemons definitely deserves fourth. I think that Green Death deserves fifth. And I think I might promote Mind of Evil into S tier, maybe. Yeah, I think that's fine. And then Silurians is fine in A. I think this is a good A tier. There's nothing I'd really shift. You know what I will do? Last minute change. Yeah. Planet of the Spiders gets promoted to the bottom of A. I think that feels good. I like the look of that, you know. And then B tier looks pretty decent. I'm definitely going to get some sauce in the comments for putting the Mutants that high. Maybe we'll put Frontier in Space above the Sea Devils. No, we'll put it behind the Sea Devils. And the rest seems fine to me. If it were up to me, I'd put the Time Monster top of C. But for the sake of my neck, I'm going to leave it at the bottom of C and spare myself. But yeah, that has been all of the John Pertwee Third Doctor stories ranked in this tier list. Once again, I apologise if my ranking doesn't adhere to your rubric, but make your own list. Stick it in the comments. I'd love to see what your favourite Pertwee stories are and what your least favourite Pertwee stories are. Just keep it civil. Thank you for watching this ranking video. Hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, I guess I'll check back in with you when I've finished binging all of the Fourth Doctor's era, which might take me a minute, so you might have to hold tight for that one. But I guess I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.